I think this idea that the film's restraint is what brings it power is something I've felt really strongly while watching it. My sense is that James and the screenwriters, Lucinda Cox and Nick Drake, they knew they had this very moving true story on their hands, and therefore decided to tinker with it as little as possible. So there's very little dramatic contrivance in the film. I mean, he talks about building this thing around the ninth train and that being the source of suspense because so many aspects of this are known. I have to say, it didn't feel like much of a source of suspense to me watching it. There's no sort of specific instant that makes the young Nicholas think, oh my goodness, this is something I have to do. He's moved to help because he knows it's the right thing to do and he knows he should do it. And so he goes off and does that. There's also this, aside from a briefcase, there's no sort of artful connections between the past and the present. You know, one thing that's, you know, these things that are designed to make you think of, okay, so this links to that and that links to this. It's
there's no lost love or anything like that, which exactly. I really loved. I really was so glad they avoided that.
It's very methodical. Now, look, I love the fact that they bucked the formula for that. I also will say, I think it means that Flynn and Hopkins are both perhaps slightly hemmed in, because self-effacing decency is the key note that they have to play, and there's not a great deal of variation beyond that. They're both great, but they don't necessarily feel like they're, you know, up there with their best performances because of the range is quite kind of hemmed in that way. They do play them really nicely. I also think Johnny Flynn does do a very good young Anthony Hopkins. He picks up enough mannerisms and enough kind of turns, you know, ways of turning phrases without it feeling like an impersonation. Helena Bonham Carter, of course, just mentioned as playing the mother Babette in the early sequences, who pesters the Home Office to speed up the immigration process. This part is so Helena Bonham Carter.
I know, it's so
it's
her.
As if you can imagine them sort of pressing the last button on the laptop of the last line of dialogue, and then the window just flies open and she kind of bursts in like Nanny McPhee or something, ready to do the thing.
I'm here.
It's so much her. And again, you know, this is not the widest range that she's ever had to play, but the notes that she's given to play are played beautifully. I think also there's another thing that gave me pause slightly is it uses the That's Life sequence where he is recognised finally for his good work. I mean, That's Life is held up as the butt of a few jokes over the course of the film because it is quite tacky and quite exploitative in ways that this film very much isn't.
Yeah.
And yet it does end up pretty much reproducing that episode beat for beat in order to get this moment of catharsis at the end. And it is very moving. I do sort of think, well, you know, it can't have been that tacky and that crass if you're able to kind of resort to it and it's still able to resonate in this way now.
But I don't think the film revolves around it in the same way that you might think it would before you go into the film.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. It absolutely doesn't. And I think that's why, I mean, you know...
I think you have to include it because it's such a recognisable slice of Nicholas Winton's history.
It's got to be in there.
It has to be, right? Yes. That's the viral moment that James was talking about.
Yes.
I totally get the point. And like Samantha Spiro playing Esther Ranson, very hammy, very kind of in your face. It's a little moment out of the kind of calmer tapestry of what's going on in Anthony Hopkins' era.
Yes, and I think also what's kind of interesting about that sequence is that he's almost being outed as a hero. You know, he's not an unsung hero who's finally being sung about. He's almost kind of being dragged into recognition for his deeds against his will. Now, this is not sort of reactionary grumbling, oh, how good to see someone doing something like that, virtue signaling about it or anything like that. But it is a really unusual dynamic to see nowadays, that someone would do something and then not want to have it discussed and to have it packed away. And then the kind of that being made public is difficult. And I think that dynamic is to me ultimately what made the film work as well as it did. You know, it is a weepy, of course it is. I was in floods of tears at this in this sequence. It's not just a weepy. It's not Marley and Me. You know, you're not kind of coming in and sort of wailing away. It's much more sophisticated than that.
It's
and subtle than that.
It's so impressive. I suppose it's that thing about you never know those little moments that you do can make such a huge difference. And just hearing from, which I didn't get to speak to James about, but really wanted to, was about the influence from the Kinder who are now grown up, who have now seen the film, who have been involved in it. I think it would be really lovely to kind of sit down and talk to them about their experiences, because we just get such a small snapshot in the film.
Thanks very much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as we enjoyed making it. While you're here, check out all the other videos because they're cool too, aren't they?
Yeah, and if you want to keep up to date with everything Kermode and Mayo's take, then check out our social channels.
I mean, why wouldn't you?
I mean, I would. I have done.
Excellent.